I, Lelouch Britannia, command you. Now all of you, die!
Happily, Your Highness!
It's moments like these that make Code Geass my favorite anime of all time, bar none. And while there's 101 different things I would love to talk about this series, we all know why you're here. So I want to introduce my favorite anime, Code Geass, and the science behind Lelouch's Geass of absolute obedience. I'm your host Orion, and welcome to Anime and Biology Revealed. Now for some disclaimers. I'm going to be focusing on Lelouch's Geass in particular. So no C2, Charles, or even Mao's Geass. And again, just like my last video, there will be spoilers, so don't watch this if you don't want Code Geass spoiled. Alright, let's delve right into this. To begin with, let's go over what the series establishes about Lelouch's Geass.
To use my Geass, I need to have direct eye contact with the subject. Transparent objects like eyeglasses present no problem. The effective range is approximately 270 meters, and the subject appears to have no memory of events before, during, or after the power is used. I think this is due to damage caused by the Geass interfering with the brain of the subject. Also, if the signal's optical, I can reflect it.
So given how Lelouch describes it, and what we see throughout the series, I don't think it's much of a stretch to say that Lelouch's Geass power is light-based in nature. What I mean by this is I believe that Lelouch is capable of emitting a beam of light from his eye. This light he would emit would travel to the target's brain through their optic nerve and carry the intent of Lelouch's orders into their brain and rewrite it so they would obey him absolutely. I understand this is only a visual for the audience, but I do believe my hypothesis is supported by how it is animated when Lelouch Geass is somebody. So if I think Geass is light-based in nature, we obviously have to address the question, what is light to begin with? Light, very simply put, is electromagnetic radiation, which is a complex way of saying a very specific type of energy. And energy can be defined as the ability to do work. The work in question would be to excite the neurons inside the target's brain, causing them to fire. Now, how exactly that leads to absolute obedience, we'll have to delve into a bit of the biochemistry involved with the brain. But first, I have to explain how light information even gets to the brain to begin with, and that obviously starts with the eye. Light first passes through the cornea, and then goes to the lens, which is then focused onto the back of the eye, which is where the retina is located. The retina contains specialized cells known as cones and rods, which some of you may have heard of before. These specialized cells then respond to light by inducing the phototransduction pathway. Now, I realize this diagram may seem scary to some of you, but let me try to keep this simple as possible. Essentially what happens, there's a protein known as rhodopsin that undergoes a conformational change when struck by light. This conformational change in rhodopsin triggers a cascade effect, which leads to the development of an electrochemical gradient which transmits the signals up the optic nerve to the brain. Now, an electrochemical gradient is one where chemicals are used to create an electrical charge on either side of the membrane. This communicates to the cell to propagate the gradient down its signaling pathway. This signal is typically transmitted to the occipital lobe of the brain. Got all that? Good, because now it's time to describe how Lelouch can dominate a person's will. Now, the biology of personality is a rather interesting topic. While I don't believe the brain alone is responsible for personality, I will admit it does hold a large sway over what dictates personality. Most people are probably familiar with the fact that the brain is made up of millions of neurons. These neurons communicate with one another through action potentials, the action potentials being that electrochemical gradients we talked about earlier. The pattern by which these action potentials travel from neuron to neuron dictates both memory and emotions. Now, if the Lelouch is capable of transmitting energy in the form of light, infused with his intent into his target, this energy, once it reaches the brain, would trigger new synapses to fire. which will change the mentality of the target of Lelouch's Geass. Think of it this way. When you receive new stimuli, your brain fires new synapses in a different pattern to process this new information. This new firing pattern becomes the way your brain stores this new stimulus. What Lelouch's Geass does then, it triggers these new firing patterns to such a degree that it dominates all else within the subject's brain. This would explain why characters like Euphemia and Nunnally could resist Lelouch's Geass for a moment, as more synapses would need to be fired in order to convince them to do something so contrary to their core ideals. We can even watch as part of Nunnally's mind succumbs to the Geass and starts commanding her body to obey while her higher cognitive function still rebels against him. This would also explain why characters that are dying, such as Shirley, my apologies Shirley, I don't mean to use your death as an example, don't obey Lelouch's Geass due to the irrevocable damage their brain is undergoing by, well, dying. Many of Shirley's neurons that would have been activated by Lelouch's Geass are now dying due to the blood loss she has sustained through her bullet wound. This same thought process can still be applied to Euphemia, though their cases are slightly different. Shirley being Geass as she was dying, while Euphemia received her Geass before she was dying. And we can watch as the neurons involved with Euphemia's Geass slowly die away, leaving her core ideology the last to remain. At this time, I would like to admit my formal apology for using the two saddest deaths in Code Geass to support my hypothesis. As recompense, please enjoy these clips of Euphemia and Shirley being happy.
Someday. I told you! I said love is power!
Alright, that's all I dare play for fear of copyright. So, to summarize my hypothesis, I believe that Lelouch is capable of emitting a beam of light from his eye. This light is then processed by the target of the Geass, which triggers new neuron pathways to fire. These new neuron pathways tell the brain to obey Lelouch and his will, absolutely. But what do you all think? Is there something about my hypothesis that I'm missing? Let me know what you think down below. Now for my next hypothesis. I have a few ideas on how I want to attack it. But in the meantime, thank you all for watching, and God bless.